Good day, everyone. My name is Shairel and welcome to our review. And our focus for today is to the children and adolescent literature. And I prepared 10 questions, and each questions you only have 10 seconds to answer. All right, so let's start. Let's proceed to our first question. The span of years during which boys and girls move from childhood to adulthood mentally, emotionally, socially, and physically is called A. Adulthood, B. Late childhood, C. Adolescence, D. Infancy. So I'll give you 10 seconds to answer, and timer starts now. The correct answer is adolescence, letter C. So for the explanation, because it is the period of transition between childhood and adulthood. So in this phase, there will be huge changes to the body and the perspectives of a young person, like how she or he sees the world. All right. So aside from that, there will also be changes to the emotional, cognitive, and how the person interacts with other people or what we call social. And adolescence usually occurs between the ages of 12 and 18. But remember, the age range may also vary. Now, for the remaining choices that are not the correct answer, so let's explain. Late childhood, it pertains to the period just before adolescence. What do I mean about this? It means children in this stage are still in the concrete operational stage of cognitive development. So let me give you an example. You have two candy bars of the exact same size. You break one candy bar up into two equally sized pieces, and the other candy bar up into four smaller but equally sized sections. So a child in this concrete operational stage of cognitive development will understand that both candy bars are still the same amount. The adulthood refers to the stage after adolescence, and it's typically starting around age 18 or 21, while the infancy refers to the early stage of life, means from birth to around 2 years of age, where it was more focused on the physical and sensory development. It is a literary term used for language and description that appeals to our five senses. A. Figurative language. B. Poetry. C. Imagery. And D. Riddles. Now, the correct answer is letter C because when we say imagery, it pertains to the language we use to describe a certain scenery, situation, or a person that helps the readers to create an image or idea in their head. Okay, and it does not only paint a picture, but it also aims to portray the sensational and emotional experience within text. The question is why imagery, where in fact figurative language can also be the answer. So to make it clear to everyone, figurative language and imagery are somehow similar with each other, but they still have a huge difference. Figurative language uses words in a non-literal way to create a more impactful or complex meaning, like metaphor and simile, and they use the figurative language to describe something, but they are not the same thing. So we all know that poetry is a genre of literature, a form of writing, and it's also a way of expressing ideas and feelings. On the other hand, riddles are a type of puzzle or question phrased in a clever way. So it requires the solver or us to guess the answer. Okay, What do you call the lines that are grouped together in a poem? A. Stanza. B. Meter. C. Structure of poetry. D. Rhyme. The correct answer is stanza. It's a series of lines grouped together in order to divide a poem. So the other choices are wrong because first, meter refers to the rhythmic pattern of a poem, and it's not about how they are physically grouped together, but it's about the sound and flow of the lines. And when we say structure of poetry, it refers to the elements that give a poem its shape and organization. Now, lastly, the rhymes. And this is obviously not the correct answer because it focuses on the repetition of similar sounding words, a form of story for children that is usually short, with few characters, and very often the characters are anthropomorphic or animals who behave and speak like humans. A. Fairy tale. B. Is it myth? Or C. Legend. D. Fable. Letter B is the correct answer because perfectly fits all criteria that have been mentioned because fables are often told to children to teach them lessons. Also, these often features animals, objects, or forces of nature as characters in the story, which are anthropomorphized or meaning they are given human qualities. Now, for the other choices, the myth pertains to the traditional stories and also about the natural phenomena. So it talks about the region of a people or culture or the actions of gods and goddesses. While fairy tale is also stories for children with a few characters. But in fairy tale, there are also magical elements and fantastical creatures like fairies, giants, witches, but its focus is for entertainment, not always direct lessons. Okay. Lastly, legend, which is known as traditional stories that tells about the remarkable deeds of real or supposedly real people, like the heroes, saints, kings, which practice can enhance cognitive development among toddlers. A. Shared reading. B. Early enrollment in fun school. C. Making child compete with other toddlers. D. Buying expensive toys for the toddler. Or letter A. Shared reading helps the children to enhance their cognitive development. When you read aloud, the child will be exposed to a wide range of new words, and sometimes there are words that they don't know how to pronounce. And if we read it aloud, then they will have an idea on how to pronounce the specific words. The other choices, they are wrong because early enrollment in found school isn't 100% sure that the child's cognitive development will enhance. All right? While the making child compete with other toddlers is absolutely wrong because exposing them in competition is not recommended for cognitive or emotional development because especially they are in a stage of developing self-awareness and social skills, so exposing them in that situation can just lead to stress and anxiety and also low self-esteem. Okay. Lastly, buying expensive toys for the toddler. Of course, it doesn't have anything to do in enhancing the cognitive development, although toys can be used as a learning tools, but the price doesn't actually determine the effectiveness. He was regarded as the great master of literary fairy tales. Now, A. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, B. Hans Christian Andersen, C. Lewis Carroll, D. William Shakespeare. Letter B. Okay. Hans Christian Andersen is known as the great master of literary fairy tales. He actually created original fairy tales with distinct authorial voices, complex characters. So some of his tales are known, if you're familiar with the Little Mermaid and the Ugly Duckling, the Thumbelina, and also the Emperor's New Clothes. The other individuals are not the answer because some of them are and composer of enlightenment, and while the other is also a was an English writer, mathematician, logician, and photographer. William Shakespeare, okay, because his works are more complex and deal with more mature themes that cannot be understand. Okay. Children's literature gives students a sense of appreciation about their blank heritage. A. Ancestral. B. Cultural. C. Parents. D. Self. Time's up. So the correct answer is, next one. Okay. Cultural. So the answer is cultural because it exposes children to traditions and customs wherein the stories features the rituals, festivals, and also the daily life practices to the specific culture. Okay, aside from that, it also gives them awareness about the cultures of other people. And by doing that and by having this kind of awareness, of course, it will help them to understand and respect the differences. All right, so the other choices are not the answer because first, ancestral, we can say that it is a part of cultural heritage, but ancestral is focusing on the lineage and the family history. While the parents, or it is true that parents can transfer knowledge to children about the culture, but children's literature exposes the children heritage that extends beyond their immediate family to a wider community. Okay? Lastly, the self. Literature can certainly help children understand themselves, okay, and develop their personal identity. But remember, the self heritage isn't a recognized concept in this context. What is the main purpose of children's literature? A. Entertain or instruct young people. B. Persuade people. C. Tell stories about important events in the past. D. Pass on history. Entertain or instruct young people. Because remember, children's literature is made to entertain and give young people lessons about life. All right. And aside from that, it provides new knowledge to the children. And it actually helps them to enhance their vocabulary, like what I said earlier. And aside from the vocabulary, it can also help them to enhance their communication skills. Now, persuade people is not the main purpose because children's literature focuses on the exploration of children and fosters curiosity. Additionally, the other choices tell stories about important events in the past and pass on history. Well, historical fiction for children can exist and serves as a valuable purpose, but always keep in mind that the main purpose of children's literature as a whole, okay, as a whole, is not solely focusing on remembering the past events, but to give entertainment and give the children a lessons about life. Which of the following best describes illustrated books? A. Books for very young children are primarily illustrations with little or no text. B. Depict what is happening in the story and provide less pictures. C. Texts are dominant in the book. Or D. All of the above. Okay, letter A. So let me explain this one. We all know that visuals play a dominant role in conveying the story. In this kind of books, the illustrations are not just for decoration or design. Remember that they're essential to telling the story. Because just like in letter B, like depict what is happening in the story and provide less pictures, it obviously contradicts the idea of an illustrated book. All right. On the other hand, we have the letter C, texts are dominant in the book. So this describe a standard-based book, not an illustrated one. While the last letter, which is letter D, all of the above, is actually wrong, since options B and C are clearly incorrect descriptions of what illustrated book. What is a type of literature for children that has a purpose of deceiving its listeners about its meaning? A. Drama. B. Riddles. C. Poetry. D. Story. Letter B or riddles is a puzzling question that its purpose is to playfully mislead or deceive the listener. The other options are incorrect because drama involves play and theatrical performances. On the other hand, poetry uses aesthetic and rhythmic qualities of language. Lastly is the story. We all know that story tells a sequence of events, while although stories can have a suspense or plot twist, but remember that the fundamental or the uh, purpose of a story is to communicate a narrative or a story, unlike the riddles that is focusing on the puzzling questions. All right. Now, I hope that that's all. And I hope that you learned something from this topic. And thank you for listening, everyone. Have a nice day.